Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in. We will wait just one more minute for some more folks to trickle in, and then we will get going. Alrighty, so welcome to the Morris-Jumel Mansion's December virtual parlor chat, History of the Holiday Season. I'm here with our panel of holiday experts. You'll get to know them a little bit more as we move further into the program. But I want to say thank you all for coming, and thank you for taking the time to come chat about the history of the holidays with us. So a little bit about the Morris-Jumel Mansion, for those of you who may not know. The Morris-Jumel Mansion was built in 1765. It is the oldest remaining house in Manhattan. It's built on the ancestral land of the Lenape people and was likely built, ran, and funded using enslaved labor. It was used as George Washington's headquarters in the fall of 1776. And then it later housed, Eliza Jamel, former Vice President Aaron Burr, and Anne Northup. And then just some housekeeping on some of our upcoming programs. Since you're interested in this one, maybe you'll be interested in some others. December 19th, we've got, which is tomorrow actually, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol as told by one actor. December 21st is going to be our last Holidays by Candlelight of the season. January 11th, so moving into the new year, is going to be our Family and Community Day that we have every month. It's free, no registration needed. And then January 15th is going to be another one of our virtual parlor chats. So lots of fun stuff coming up for us at the mansion. And now, drum roll, please. We are going to introduce our holiday experts. I'm going to read a little bit about each of our experts so you could get to know them. And then we're going to move into their sort of presentation on their holiday. Just so you know, before we hop into things, you can ask questions in the Q&A portion of the in the Q&A feature of the Zoom. So be sure to do that. We're going to have about 30 minutes at the end where we're answering and discussing some Q&A questions. And that is a very fun part of all of our VPCs. So make sure you get to do a part of that. All righty. So getting into the holiday experts of the evening. We're going to start with Kwanzaa with Khadijah McCaskill. So Khadijah has been an associated artist with Culture Push Incorporated, as well as a New York City Artist Corp grantee. She has collaborated with, over 20 institutions, including the Museum of Modern Art, Weeksville Heritage Center, and Black Space to create community arts experiences for youth throughout New York City. Khadijah has over a decade of experience as an art and museum educator, having served as a teaching artist in China, Costa Rica, and all over the United States. Her work has appeared in LA Parent Magazine and Cultural Daily. Khadijah is a connector with a particular knack for pulling together seemingly opposing ideas into a harmonious mission of community building, art, and teaching. She developed and implemented innovative art curriculums for Grand Street Settlement, Fulbright, and PBS. Alrighty, so then we have Hanukkah with Rabbi Bruce Apt. Rabbi Bruce Apt was a spiritual leader at Adat Rayim in Springfield, Virginia from 1991 until June 2020 and is now emeritus. He grew up in the Chicago suburbs and developed an early love for Judaism and the Chicago White Sox. Rabbi Apt has a master's in social work from Temple University, ordination from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and an honorary Doctor of Divinity degree. Now retired, Rabbi Apt is a visiting scholar at George Mason University in the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and an adjunct professor in religion and the Honors College at GMU. He is the past president of the Community Board for Operation Understanding DC and the Community Board for Hillel at George Mason University. He also served as president of the Board of Jewish Education of Greater Washington. And in his new roles and retirement, he and his wife Sue look forward to visiting their four children and 9 grandchildren much more often. And then finally, we have Emily. So Emily Vera Haley is a museum educator at the Bone House in Flushing, Queens. She received her BA in history at Binghamton University and her MA in liberal arts at Empire State University. Her hobbies include reading, research, traveling, and baking, and spending part of every summer working on archaeology digs in upstate New York. That is very cool. This December, Emily can most often be found baking Christmas cookies in collaboration with her twin sister. Alrighty, so now we know a little bit about our holiday experts of the evening, and we are going to pass it over to Khadijah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Khadijah, and I am going to introduce Kwanzaa a little bit, and then I'm going to try to talk to you guys about Kwanzaa and put it into context through the museum. I'm also an educator at the museum as well, and I'm really happy to be representing so many parts of myself today as museum educator, as somebody who celebrated Kwanzaa, and as somebody who loves art. So I wanted to just bring a little bit of all of that to you guys today. So just to introduce Kwanzaa, it's a week-long celebration that begins the day after Christmas, from December 26th to January 1st. And it was created in California by Dr. Malana Karanga, who's pictured at the top. And it is based in what are known as Pan-Africanist principles and theories of Black identity. So that has to do with introducing Swahili and just the idea of moving past stereotypes that existed at the time and still do about Black culture being rootless or not necessarily having any values. So Kwanzaa is a celebration that not only like goes against those ideas about Black culture, but instills Pan-Africanist values into the end of the year. It's based into the idea of a harvest, which is where the word Kwanzaa comes from. A lot of the words that you're going to be hearing related to Kwanzaa are from Swahili. So let's just go over what's on this table here in the far right corner. And that is what is the Kwanzaa setup. So we have the Kinara, which is a candle holder with 7 candles. It's 3 red, 3 green, and 1 black. And the black one is lit first, and then every day afterwards, you light the alternating color. So red one day, green the next, so on and so forth. Everything is placed on the makika, which is a placemat. And then the candles are called the Mishumu Saba. So Saba means 7. And so those are the candles. Then, as you guys can see in the corner, there's corn, but then there's also this idea of a harvest. And the harvest is really what Kwanzaa is all about. Not only taking the fruits of what you reaped that year, right? But also making sure that you, Mahindi being the idea of kids and being children in that representation of corn. So the last and like one of the most important parts of the Kwanzaa setup table is the unity cup, or the Kikombe cha Umoja. And this is used to what's called pour libations. One part of African culture and one part of the Pan-African diasporic experience is ancestor worship. And one way that people praise and worship their ancestors is through the unity cup. Yeah. Any questions so far before I keep going? No? Okay, so why was Kwanzaa created? I started to talk a little bit about the why, but I just want to like talk a little bit more about that. So basically, Kwanzaa is based on the general genealogical understanding that African Americans' ancestry is partially due to what's known now as West Africa, but was at one point known as Angola. And our connection to West Africa as American descendants of slavery goes back to about the 1500s on this land. We really wanted to emphasize the need for creating and having another idea about Black culture, and having this moving away from an idea of Black culture being cultureless or not having a root. And a lot of slavery was about African Americans and Black Americans being torn away from a culture. So this was a reclamation in 1966, started by Maulana Karenga, along the roots of people like Martin Luther King, people like Stokely Carmichael with I'm Black and I'm Proud, who are really trying to instill a sense of culture and value for Black Americans. Kwanzaa is also an important part of Black culture, because of what was seen as Christmas. This idea of just Christian imagery in general being very Eurocentric and not really including Black people and African Americans, not really seeing themselves represented in in Christmas. So Kwanzaa was, and a lot of African Americans are Christian. So Kwanzaa was this addendum to Christmas. It was an opportunity for Black people to see themselves reflected in the holiday season. And it was just a way for us to foster community and cultural pride through these 7 principles. Now, the 7 principles are for the 7 days of Kwanzaa. Each day has its own principle. First one is umoja. And now I'm going to talk about each principle and how they have played out throughout Black history within the Morris-Jumel Museum. So the first principle is umoja, which is unity. And how do we see unity playing out at the Morris-Jumel Mansion? Me, me, the museum staff, and our ability to come together as a culture in order to keep the story going, right? And Morris-Jumel itself is an example of an institution, a building that would not have been built by itself without the unity of all the different cultures, all the different ways of life, and all the different people that came to make it what it is and that keep it standing today. The next is called Kujichagulia, and this means self-determination. My example for Kujichagulia within the museum is going to have to be Solomon Northup, the violinist and diarist who wrote 12 Years a Slave. I think that without self-determination, he would not have been able to endure what he did and persevere to tell his story and to find his freedom again. The next 2 are Ujima and Ujama. So they're connected, but they're a little bit different. So Ujima is about collective work, right? And this goes once again to the idea of African American culture not only being an addendum, but giving a different interpretation of what it means to be America, right? I think on the top of American stories, we have this idea of rugged individuals. We have our George Washingtons, who were these individual pioneers, right? But then we have people like Washington Lee. We have William Lee. We have people like Anne Northup, and people have Martha the Laundress, who are in the background, making it possible, doing this collective work to make what we see as the rugged individualism even happen on the top. The same with Ujama. Cooperative economics. So I would say that Harlem, where the museum is located, is a great example of cooperative economics, and how the Harlem Renaissance became a hub, a cultural hub for Black people, and how the museum played a part in that as well. Moving into Nia and Kuumba. Nia is purpose and Kuumba is creativity. So for Nia being purpose, one cool thing that I would love for everybody to explore within the museum is the Black Gotham organization and the work that they did to tell Anne Northup's story. And I think that the Black Gotham organization is a great example of purpose. Kuumba, so much creativity. I wanted to include Mr. Philip Simmons here, who has the gates. He is a creative artist who created those wrought iron artistry, and we even still have those gates on the outside as well. So architecture, and being creative in any aspect is Kumba. And lastly, we have faith, which is Imani. And that just speaks to the unyielding faith of African Americans in building a brighter future, even in the face of systemic oppression. So those are the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. They have played out throughout African American history. The holiday was created in 1960 with the name, but these principles are principles that have kind of echoed throughout time with African Americans and that are still really relevant today. So thank you.
All righty, I think it's my turn. Is that right? Am I doing this correctly?
It is indeed. You are all set to go.
Very good. I, again, am Bruce Aft, and it is a treat to be able to be here with all of you. And the special treat that you're going to get, for which our MC tonight, Danielle, will probably never forgive me, is the fact that if you look on the right side of this chart, or PowerPoint that she put up, you will see what looks to me like dreidels. And for those who have not seen a dreidel before, it is a spinning top. And I am going to treat you to a very brief song, which is a song just about every Jewish child knows, which is just kind of like for fun because it's a top. By the way, the origins of this are that when the Syrian Greeks came in to try to make sure that the Jewish people were not studying their religion, what would happen is they were actually secretly studying Judaism and they were studying Hebrew. But when the authorities would come in, they would have this top that they would be spinning. And we have 4 letters that appear. And I don't know that you can really see that from the chart, but those 4 letters are the Hebrew letters Nun, Hey, Shin, and Gimel. And they are letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And they stand for Nes Gadol Hayasham, a Nun, a Gimel, a Hey, and a Shin. A great miracle happened there. And that, of course, means that the great miracle happened in the Middle East. And you can see that it just all of a sudden seemed to appear under the menorah there. You can see, as she's pointing to it, the Nun, the Gimel, the Hey, and the Shin. Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin. A great miracle happened there. If you get one of these in Israel, it's not a misprint. It will be Nun, Gimel, Hey, Pei, which is a great miracle happened here because obviously that's where the miracle happened. The miracle, by the way, is that I haven't sung for you yet, but it's coming, something to look forward to. The great miracle is that when they went to restore the temple after a very intense battle that the Maccabees fought, there was only enough oil left to keep the eternal light burning for who knew how long, maybe a day. And for some reason, until they could get more kosher oil, more ritually appropriate oil, the lamp, the eternal light burned, the menorah burned for 8 days and 8 nights. And then they found enough oil to keep it burning. And the miracle is that that oil, again, provided for that light in the eternal light. I just found it interesting, by the way, that with the Kwanzaa presentation, that there's a candelabrum with 7 candles and, probably one for maybe each day of the week in addition to each day of Kwanzaa. It's interesting the power of light for both holidays. But at any rate, the song that children learn is the following. And don't mute me, Danielle. It goes, I have a little dreidel, I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel, I shall play. Oh, dreidel, 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 I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, now dreidel, I shall play. And people play dreidel. It's a little gambling game. You play with toothpicks, or for any of you who are old enough to remember what pennies are in the audience, okay, you play for pennies. And if you get a certain letter, you have to either put money into the pot or take it out of the pot. And it is a way of keeping children interested. By the way, some people play it with what's called Hanukkah gelt, which you've probably all seen in the stores. Hanukkah gelt is chocolate. And it is chocolate, but it is also the Yiddish word for money. And so people have that money that they use, which are just little coins, but they're also, you can get the chocolate, which is really a neat thing to do. Let me talk about the lighting of the candles, since that's a major part of what you're seeing there. There are various types of Hanukkah lamps. You can see the one that's lit on the left. You can see the one sort of left center, the one above the dreidels, the couple on the bottom left. And it's a beautiful opportunity to portray art in different ways. And the Hanukkah, which is what a Hanukkah lamp is called, has spot for there to be 9 candles each night, because the oil lasted for 8 days and 8 nights. Each night we light one extra candle. Okay, so the first night we light one, the second night we light two, on up to eight the eighth night. That seems like a no-brainer because the oil got, the miracle got stronger every night. But there was a rabbi in the Talmud, our sacred rabbinic writings, that said we should light all 8 the first night, as you can see in the diagram on the left, and that you should light all 8 the first night because the oil was strongest the first night. And then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and on the last night just one candle because the oil was not as strong. But Rabbi Hillel prevailed, the person who's responsible for Hillel organizations on college campuses, because he said every night that the oil kept burning, we light an additional candle because the miracle becomes greater. And that's something I want to talk about here right now. The essence of Hanukkah is the miracle of religious freedom. And how far are we willing to go to protect religious freedom? Again, as children, we have the opportunity to talk about dreidels and Hanukkah gelt and little presents and having a great time. But as adults, I think we're put into a position where we have to think about how far are we willing to go for religious freedom. And one of the interesting things about the Hanukkah is that when we light the candles, we light them from left to right, the same way we read Hebrew, but we light them, we put them in the Hanukkah right to left, but we light them left to right. So we put them in the candelabrum, the menorah, the lamp, right to left to simulate Hebrew, and then we light them left to right so that each night, the first candle that day, the candle for that day gets lit first. So like the first day, obviously, you light one candle. The second day, you would light the one on the left so that it gets its day to be the first. The third day, the third candle gets its day to be the first. And if we care that much about candles, how much more we should care about human beings. And that's so integrated into the idea of religious freedom that we need to be inclusive and be caring about the freedom of all to be able to pursue their points of view. So Hanukkah serves as a reminder of the importance of working diligently for religious freedom. The main hero was Judah Maccabee. He was the leader of this group of Maccabees. Some of the foods that we eat in Israel, they eat what's called sufganiot. Danielle said she would send everybody a jelly donut in honor of tonight. Just make sure she's got your address so she can send you a jelly donut. You're welcome, Danielle, for that. Okay, the reason we eat those jelly donuts is because they are greasy and they're filled with oil to remind us of the oil that kept the Hanukkah, that kept, the eternal light burning. We also have potato pancakes, and those potato pancakes also made with a lot of oil. Even my cardiologist gives me permission to eat potato pancakes this time of the year because it reminds us of the oil. And I want to conclude, until there will be questions later on, with one really bad joke, because it wouldn't be a presentation by me if it didn't have a bad joke. And that is that when you're cooking potato pancakes in your frying pan, if you see a little crumb there in the frying pan amidst the oil, you know what you call it? An unidentified frying object. I'm turning it over to my Christian colleague to add some dignity after I made my presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. That's going to be a tough act to follow. Thank you very much. My name is Emily Vera Haley, and I am going to talk about Christmas. Let's jump right in. Okay, today's celebrations of Christmas in the U.S. include putting up a Christmas tree, waiting for a visit from that jolly elf Santa Claus, clad in fur-lined red velvet, arriving to bring gifts to children on December 25th, dinner and desserts, rich in calories and color, weighing down our tables, and Christmas-themed music is everywhere, in stores, the radio, and even in elevators. But in order to understand how and why we celebrate Christmas the way we do today in the United States, it is necessary to take a brief trip further back in time to how Christianity in general began the celebration of Christmas. Up until about 200 years ago, Christmas celebrations in America largely reflected the pagan origins of the holiday. Celebrations were so wild in the early 1800s that New York City called police in to contain the jubilation, which was more akin to hooliganism. The raucous Christmas partying is rooted in a time when pre-Christian cultures marked the winter solstice. Romans, for example, had a week-long festival of self-indulgence dedicated to Saturn, the god of fertility and the harvest. Saturnalia was a time of orgies, drunkenness, and plunder. The earliest Christians, meanwhile, didn't generally celebrate the birth of Jesus. They focused on his death and resurrection. The Bible itself doesn't indicate when Jesus was born. As the new faith spread, Christian converts continued their winter solstice celebrations. In the early 4th century, church leaders and Emperor Constantine the Great finally declared December 25th as a celebration of Christ's birth. They were trying to diffuse the fact that a lot of the new Christians were still celebrating the old Roman holidays, and those holidays included a lot of drinking and debauchery. And they're trying to diffuse that because they were trying to bring in lessons of sin and redemption. And it was a little hard to do. Two of the most popular Christmas traditions come directly from the Bible story: angels and gift giving. Magi from the east brought the baby Jesus gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, while angels announced his birth. But many other traditions were adapted from the ancient cultures that came to embrace Christianity. In the darkest days of the year, pagans used torches and other fires to call back the light and warmth of the sun. The church taught that Jesus came to be the light of the world, and Christians continue to celebrate that with Christmas Eve candlelight services. Many pagans, particularly in Northern Europe, used greenery to ward off evil. The year-round flourishing evergreens and winter berries were considered miraculous. The green represented to these people life. Naturally, when they converted to Christianity, it took on a new meaning, and it represented the everlasting life guaranteed through salvation through Christ. And although the fact that, even in the midst of the hardest, roughest times, faith did not die. There's also the Viking tradition of mistletoe. Whenever they met for a battle and they suddenly looked up and they saw mistletoe over their head, they couldn't fight because they had to make peace. Mistletoe was the plant of peace. An 8th century missionary monk, St. Boniface, is credited with giving new meaning to the popular pre-Christian tradition of the evergreen tree. He pointed out that the triangular shape of the evergreen represented the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and converted those particular men on that day. About 1,000 years ago, people started dragging evergreens into their homes and setting them up for Christmas. Now, originally they were hung upside down from the ceiling. Then eventually they turned them right side up, and about 1500, Martin Luther created the first fire hazard by putting a candle on an evergreen tree in an attempt to imitate the starlight as it sprinkled through the evergreen trees outside. And now we come to North America, to what will become the United States of America. We have a record of Captain John Smith celebrating Christmas, and that eggnog was consumed in the 1607 Jamestown settlement. Despite a Christianizing of some pagan practices in many areas, the raucous revelries persisted, so much so that in Massachusetts, the Puritans actually banned Christmas celebrations for a time. They wanted to get rid of those revelries, and they pointed out that no such celebrations were referenced in the Bible. This kind of austerity also extended to other groups, such as the Quakers. Christmas remained an unpopular popish holiday throughout colonial New England. Indeed, even in the early years of the American Republic, Christmas was almost exclusively celebrated by Anglicans, that is, Episcopalians, as well as Methodists, Lutherans, and Catholics, and regionally, southern states, which were mostly Anglican and Methodist, they celebrated it more than the northern ones. And in New York, where we are, there was the Dutch influence on Christmas, which went beyond the end of Dutch governance in 1664. In Holland, they have Sinterklaas or Sint Nicolaas, and they celebrate the feast day of Sinterklaas on December 6th. And this figure is based on St. Nicholas of Myra, a 4th century saint, but more about him in just a minute. Then 3 key factors changed everything. In 1822, theologian Clement C. Moore published the now classic poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known as Was the Night Before Christmas. In England, Charles Dickens' 1843 A Christmas Carol became a huge hit. Meanwhile, Queen Victoria popularized family Christmas practices introduced by her German husband, Prince Albert, namely the Tannenbaum, or Christmas tree, lit up with candles balanced on the branches. Those 3 things suddenly opened up Christmas for families. Victorian Americans loved the kinder, gentler Christmas celebrations, and more, Santa Claus became part of it. But where does Santa Claus come from? Santa likely evolved from 2 historic characters. One, the 4th century Christian bishop, St. Nicholas of Myra, which was in Anatolia, which is present-day Turkey, who, according to tradition, gave secret gifts to poor parishioners and showed generosity to children. This idea became the idea of giving gifts to children at Christmas, and also acted as a reminder of the gifts given to the Christ child from the 3 Magi. The other, King Wenceslas, a 10th century Bohemian duke who converted his country to Christianity, is remembered for his goodness and generosity. There may also be a third inspiration. The image of the big, jolly man in a red suit may also have origins in King Henry VIII of England, from depictions of him in green or red robes lined with fur, but I think that's strictly where the similarity ends. Okay, those 2 figures gradually melded together and evolved to the jolly old red-suited elf of modern celebrations. Many people think of Santa as being really a secular part of Christmas, yet the beginnings and the roots of Santa are based with 2 very spiritual men who are very important Christians in history. Some believe that Santa's popularity solidified the celebration of Christmas as a national American holiday. In fact, Christmas did not become a federal holiday until 1870 under President Ulysses S. Grant. Do the pagan origins in some way take away from the spiritual aspects of Christmas? One might feel that actually it enhances it in many ways. The roots of these particular items were not Christian in origin. Their meaning when people were converted became very, very Christian. That might even make them more important because during the conversion process, the culture was converted as well. While Christmas is now celebrated wherever there are Christian communities around the world, nowhere are those celebrations as pervasive or elaborate, or I reckon as commercial as here in the United States. Thank you, and I'm ready to jump into a discussion about kind of how we do the celebrations today. So I want to make a point about how one of the celebrations take place very commercially. But is everybody else kind of ready? I'll just go ahead. So
yeah, did you want to chat with the group first, or did you want to? Are we ready to jump into the big discussion?
Whatever you guys feel.
Okay, so yeah, thank you all for that. So as promised, we have some discussion questions for our panelists. So I am going to read them out, and then you can all jump in, and we can chat a little bit more. So the first question that we have here is, what do you think are the most meaningful or surprising ways that the holiday season has changed? So thinking all the way back in history, all the way up until today, what do you think has been either meaningful or surprising or something very interesting that's changed about the holiday season?
I would let me just say that echoing kind of what Emily was about to be talking about, I would suggest there are two things. One is the commercialization of Hanukkah. You know, it used to be a time when people would exchange a little bit of Hanukkah gelt, just a couple of bucks or something. But now we have the elaborate gift giving that is, very, it kind of imitates Christmas and its commercialization as well. And that continues to change every year. This year, because the 2 days, Hanukkah begins on the same day as Christmas, everybody's saying there's this many shopping days left to Christmas and Hanukkah. And that has become increasingly emphasized. And it wasn't meant to be that commercialized a holiday. That's kind of on a lighter note. But on a more serious, on a really maybe more serious note for sure, in America today and throughout the world, given the increasing anti-Semitism that there is genuine concern about the importance of Hanukkah is reminding us that we have to be very diligent in fighting for religious freedom. I will tell you, and I'm 70 years old, and I experienced it as I was growing up very little anti-Semitism. And some of the students that I deal with, and Danielle, who is a student at George Mason, can probably echo this. They're experiencing far more anti-Semitism than I ever did. And in fact, the holiday of Hanukkah reminds us again, as I just said, to be diligent in fighting for religious freedom. And that's not only for Jews. I mean, my Muslim friends feel that way. There are certain Christian friends who feel that they're being censored in terms of things that they can say. And I think we all have to take a good hard look at what we're doing to create religious freedom. So that's just my response to number one, but I'll be quiet again.
Yeah. Oh,
Emily,
thank you.
did you want to jump in now?
Oh, yes. I mean, I feel silly. It's a much lighter note. The Hallmark romance Christmas movies, those have really taken off, and they're kind of on fire. It seems Netflix also carries them as well, but there's more and more of them every year. And they even do the old ones and show them all. They offer them. And it seems everyone I know also has seen Hot Frosty. So I just want to say that's kind of another avenue that the commercialization has taken, but to make easy viewing for the public. But it all has Christmas themes, and not all the Christmas themes are on all of them, but you see they pick and choose, and that's just another kind of aspect of it.
I would say that Kwanzaa has gone through what I would like to call like the Juneteenth effect, where maybe because of different socio-political situations happening, like Black Lives Matter, people are becoming more aware of African American holidays. But Kwanzaa is really interesting because a lot of people who identify as African American don't actually celebrate it themselves unless they have kind of more of a Pan-Africanist kind of mindset or a different relationship with African culture in general. But I think that Kwanzaa is still one of the like youngest holidays, right? It's like barely even like it's not even 100 yet. So I think that we have a lot of time to see how Kwanzaa is going to change, and if yeah, I think also it's going to be interesting to just watch young Black Americans in general and how they conceive of their racial identity. I think Pan-Africanism is connected to a lot of the 60s and a lot of the Black and I'm proud mindset. And I think as we're moving forward in time, Black Americans are more understanding that we come from a tri-racial or ethnic origin. So where does that put Africa in our story? How do we connect back to Africa? I think that's going to be interesting to see. So nothing to report just yet, but lots coming up.
Alrighty, awesome. So now our final discussion question from me, and then we'll hop into the Q&A. So folks, if you haven't already, start adding those questions into the Q&A feature. So last discussion would be, what is a main takeaway that you'd like to have people understand about the holiday you've discussed with us today? We could start. anywhere. Rabbi Bruce, you're unmuted. So if you're ready to go, I may be putting you on the spot.
No, that's fine. You know, the takeaway that I think I'd like people to understand about the holiday is its contemporary relevance, you know, and I think it's a universal relevance. You know, I think it has to do with, you know, things ranging from the freedom that a woman may have to choose things about her body. It may have to do with the treatment of people of color. It may have to do with anti-Semitism. It may have to do with, you know, Islamophobia. It may have to do with gender or sexual choices. And I have found just the relevance, the universal relevance of this holiday today. And also, while doing that, and Danielle really helped me with this because I was going to be very serious. And she said, no, it's a happy holiday. And it is a happy holiday. We're joyful. We sing songs like I sang for you. By the way, if anybody's interested, and I'm not going to sing this one, but look up Light One Candle by Peter, Paul, and Mary. Light One Candle by Peter, Paul, and Mary, because there's a line in there that says, let not anger tear us apart. And for me, certainly a Jewish message, but it's a very universal message. And it's certainly in today's world, an American message. Let not anger tear us apart. So that I think is a takeaway I'd like to have us think about tonight.
Oh, should I go? Okay.
I was going to say, who wants to go next? So Khadijah, you want to go next?
I do. One of the main takeaways I want people to kind of have is the Nguzo Saba, or the 7 principles. Once again, Umoja, Kujichagalia, Ujima, Ujama, Kuumba, Nia Imani, Faith. I know I didn't count on my fingers right. It's 7. But the Nguzo Saba are not only like just important for African American culture and how they've played out across time. I think anybody can connect to these principles. And, you know, part of being Black American is being American. So as much as they are a part of the African Americans experience specifically, they're American, and that the 7 principles would not have manifested in America in the way that they have if we weren't American. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people to look more into the Nguzo Saba and how they even play out in your life.
And I just want to say, I am amazed how flexible and mutable Christianity has been from where it started with pagan roots and the melding of celebrations to where it is today. It's incredible how much it has incorporated and changed and included things. So I think it's just fascinating. And I think the Christmas tree is actually a very kind of a nice symbol, and just the evergreen part of it, that's a very kind of nice symbology with life. So yeah.
Alrighty, awesome. So thank you for hopping in on those discussion questions. We're going to move to the Q&A and do a few more questions from there. Ooh, this is an interesting one. So this is, I think, particularly from Emily. For Emily, sorry. There's some controversy that Henry Livingston Jr. actually wrote The Night Before Christmas and not Clement Moore. Has your research come across anything about this, or do you have any opinions about it?
I did not see that in my research. If anything, I saw mention of Washington Irving and his influence possibly on Clement C. Moore, and on also the bring about of these kind of the 1800s and the tradition towards family and these family tales that were a little bit more inclusive and less raucous, less about revelry. But I didn't see anything about that. But now I'm curious. I'll look it up.
Well, it sounds like that's another person in that whole debacle of who actually wrote the story. So that may make the research harder. But We have another question that is there a myth that you hear a lot from people about your holiday that you are surprised persists? So maybe something from the past that you're still hearing today that's like, how is that even still around? Maybe it's about the Hallmark movies and that they're not doing well in the ratings, and they apparently very, very much are. What do you folks think?
Well, the one that I hear a lot about is that, people tell me, they say, does Hanukkah Harry come visit? Is a sort of like an imitation of Santa Claus. And I hate to dispel this for if there's any children in that audience, but there really is no Hanukkah Harry. Okay. It's just I mean, people give gifts, but it's not Hanukkah Harry. And then the other one is that a lot of people, and this is prevalent in a lot of interfaith families, they will call their Christmas tree a Hanukkah bush. There's no symbolism in Judaism about a Hanukkah bush. If people have a tree, it's a Christmas tree. It's not a Hanukkah bush. So those two things kind of perpetuate themselves. Hanukkah Harry and the Hanukkah bush, neither of which is really factually correct.
A lot of people tend to think that Kwanzaa is like a chocolate Hanukkah. And I will say that like there's definitely similarities, and I definitely think that Milana Karenga was inspired by Hanukkah in terms of how he interpreted the traditions. I wouldn't say that's a myth because it's true that it was inspired, but I do want to say like they're different, and that Kwanzaa is fun because it is one of the few like American holidays, in that it kind of takes a piece from everything that was in America. And, one of those things being the Black and Jewish relationship and how they informed each other throughout history in America.
Emily, did you have anything to add?
No, I'm going through my mental.
I just want to make sure everybody, I know it's awkward with the Zoom and muting and unmuting, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, and this is a fun one. What is the funniest tradition you have ever experienced? Or I guess funnest could also be a way if there's not anything that you were like, that was particularly hilarious. I don't know. Rabbi Bruce is giving us a comedy show today, so this could be.
The funniest things I know are great jokes about Santa Claus. I know great jokes about Santa Claus. Like, when you talked about him, Emily, do you know what Santa Claus eats for breakfast after he delivers presents all Christmas Eve? Do you know what he eats for breakfast? You know?
Nope. Tell me.
Ice Krispies.
I thought it was going to be a Rudolph joke in there somewhere.
That's funny. No, the fun things for Hanukkah, though, sort of the funniest thing that happens. That's a great question. I've been asked a lot of questions over time, but never, there's funny Passover stories of, people showing up like Elijah the prophet or something like that and coming into a house. But for a Hanukkah story, I'm at a loss. I could look up Hanukkah jokes, but I don't know. Are there Kwanzaa funny things?
I have a Kwanzaa story in mind. When I was younger, part of our Kwanzaa celebration was to do an African like Christmas pageant dance, not Christmas, but African Kwanzaa pageant. And it was this long performance full of great like professional performers. And then there were like us kids. And this was exciting for us because this was the first time that we could like move our shoulders and our backs and dance like we were in a music video, and all our parents were like, you can't dance like that. But it was African, so it was cultural, so it was fine. And so like all our parents were sat down waiting for this very culturally enriching Kwanzaa celebration to start, and all us kids come out, we're just like and all our parents are like, oh, but we were so excited. Like every year, that was like our thing. Like we're gonna be able to dance like this. So yeah, like Kwanzaa is the one time of year that I guess we get to scandalize our parents with our African dancing. I don't know.
So I'll tell you, Danielle, you asked us, or whoever asked this question, you're going to be sorry you asked. How do you, the best Hanukkah joke I told my college class this year, how can you recognize a Hanukkah hippie? I hope there's people in the audience who know what a hippie is. How can you recognize a Hanukkah hippie? He's the one with his hair in dreidel locks.
Okay.
Oh, you guys are so polite. And then the other one, and then I'm going to mute myself again if Danielle doesn't already mute me. How much Hanukkah gelt does a skunk get? 1 cent.
That's a real stinker.
Ooh, that was cute. Nicely
I got
done.
you back. That
Nicely
was
done.
good. Alrighty. Does anyone have any other Q&A questions before we let our lovely panelists go for the night and wrap up? Kind of a last call. Don't be afraid to throw something in. Oh, we have another one. This is for Khadijah. So, are there any folk tales / stories that are usually told during Kwanzaa?
There is a book of African folk tales that is called the Cowtail Switch that is told often, and it's just a collection of stories from West Africa specifically, but African American culture in general has really rich mythology with stories like the Brer Rabbit. And so those will often be told around that time too, as well as just more information around African traditional like religions and folklore. So understanding things like the Orishas, there's a good time for that as well.
Awesome. Alrighty.
An interesting fact about Hanukkah is that, and probably my most moving, it's not funny, it's the most moving Hanukkah moment I ever had, was I was in Israel during Hanukkah with some recent Ethiopian Jewish immigrants. And I brought out the Hanukkah and we were lighting the candle. And it is the first time that the student, I think she was about 14 or 15, had ever done it, because the Ethiopian Jews only know Judaism from the Bible, and Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Bible. Hanukkah is only mentioned in the books of the Maccabees, which are part of the Roman Catholic Bible called the Apocrypha. They're the hidden books. They're found in the New Testament, not even in the New Testament, they're found in the Roman Catholic Bible. So that it's a place that Hanukkah is found, but in Jewish tradition, it's only found in the Talmud, a sacred collection of writings during the times of the rabbis. And it says just very simply, why Hanukkah? And then it talks about the miracle of the oil and the lighting of the candle. So that's something that's very interesting. And for me, it was very moving. Here, this student, I thought she for sure would know about Hanukkah, and she didn't, because she knew the Bible as well as I did, but it wasn't a biblical festival.
That is interesting. I guess that since that was a meaningful experience, I guess maybe we could wrap up with something meaningful that you, Khadijah or Emily, if you both have like a meaningful experience, or what maybe the most meaningful part about the holidays are for you, or however you might interpret that.
Well, I guess For me, it's the Christmas tree. And that might stem from just me being a kid and waiting for the presents, being a greedy little kid. But it still holds a kind of a magic because I can recall that feeling as a child and the anticipation about the gifts and also all the rich foods that I knew we were going to eat all day long. It was also a day when we were allowed to eat as many cookies as we wanted. And we started the day off with Pillsbury cinnamon rolls. So we still do it. So it just became just a fun day for all of those reasons and yeah, things to eat.
I think for me, Kwanzaa is so meaningful because I think in a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, in a lot of what we consider to be African American or Black holidays in the United States, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of oppression that has to be talked about and has to be discussed. But I really appreciate Kwanzaa because it's so focused on joy. And one of my fondest holidays is supporting Black American businesses, going to African American bookstores, specifically to as a part of our celebration. I think it was just a good way for me to continue to like hold some joy, especially at the end of the year. And yeah.
Alrighty.
And I'm being very serious here. I think the finest holiday sermon I ever gave when I was serving a congregation, which was in a very traditional Jewish congregation, I gave a sermon about the Christmas song Drummer Boy. And in that, I suggested that the gift of this drummer boy was accepted when God smiles at him. And I think it's a reminder that each of us has, through our own religious tradition, a unique gift to give to this world. And what a wonderful celebration of peace and a great opportunity to have been together with both of you and all of you to be able to appreciate just the unique gifts that we all bring that together can maybe create a world of peace. So it was a well-received sermon about Drummer Boy, and I just thought I would mention that.
Well, that is a wonderful way to wrap us up. Thank you, Emily, Rabbi Bruce, Khadijah. Thank you so much all for joining us. And thank you to the audience members who joined us today as well. If you joined a little late, we always do post our virtual Parlor chat recordings on YouTube, so you can swing back and catch us from the beginning there. But otherwise, have a great night. And thank you all so much. Hope we can all stay in touch with the Morris-Jumel Mansion.